Hello and welcome to Global Studies with Miss Pritchard. This video is for Global 2 students. It will cover the turmoil and change in Mexico, which is pretty much Mexico during the 19th century up through World War I. And keep in mind, in this case study, independence does not always mean democracy. All right, so Mexico is the southern neighbor to the United States, and unlike the other Latin American nations, that means a common border, so there's a lot more interference with the U.S. and Mexico. Now, manifest destiny in the U.S. meant war with Mexico because Mexico owned from Texas to the Pacific. So all of those states that are now part of the U.S., we took from Mexico. All right, the first leader we need to talk about is Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. And he helped Mexico gain independence and served as president several times during the 19th century. He fought against Texan independence but lost in 1836, fought against the U.S. annexation of Texas in 1845, and eventually Santa Anna and Mexico gave up the Southwest and California in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and that's in 1848. So during Santa Anna's time in power, he lost a third of the Mexican territory. He lost power for the final time in 1855 and lived the last 20 years of his life in exile. All right, the next leader is a liberal reformer, and his name is Benito Juarez. He was a poor orphan farmer in Oaxaca, Mexico, and he starts school at the age of 15 and eventually earns a law degree in 1831. He works for the poor in the city of Oaxaca, and he's known for his honesty, integrity, and good judgment. He's elected to the city council, slowly gets more power, higher political offices. He starts a movement called La Reforma to redistribute land to the poor and offer more educational opportunities. In 1853, Santa Anna exiles him, but he returns in 1855 when Santa Anna loses power. He's elected president in 1861 after the Liberals win the Civil War, and the French promptly invade Mexico in 1862 and make Austrian Archduke Maximilian the emperor. After 5 years, the emperor is killed and the French leave. Juarez is reelected and he dies in 1872. All right, in this time, there is a caudillo, and remember, a caudillo is a military dictator. And this one is Porfirio Diaz. Now, Diaz is a poor Indian from Oaxaca, like Juarez, but he goes to power through the military, not through his law degree and lower political offices. Now, Juarez refuses to reward Diaz for his role in defeating the French, so Diaz begins to fight against him. Diaz takes power in 1876 with the support of the army, which had lost their power under Juarez, and Indians and small landowners who thought he would introduce more radical land reforms. Now, the difference with Diaz is that he did whatever was necessary to maintain power. So people lost some freedoms, but since he had stabilized the economy and began to improve the infrastructure, he didn't face massive rebellions. His use of force and favors keeps him in power until 1911. After that, it goes downhill. You get terror tactics and civil war. One of the leaders here is Francisco Madero. He is a wealthy reformer educated in the U.S. and France. He wants to strengthen Mexican democracy. He's exiled in 1910, but he successfully calls for an armed revolution. Another leader is Francisco Villa, also known as Pancho Villa, and he's a revolutionary leader from northern Mexico, and he's kind of like the Mexican Robin Hood because he steals from the rich and gives to the poor. He supported Madero and won many battles against Diaz. Another one is Emiliano Zapata. He is a revolutionary leader from southern Mexico, and he wants land and liberty for the poor. He also supports Madero and wins battles against Diaz. All right. Victoriano Huerta is another one. Madero doesn't enact the reforms quickly enough, so he loses support and resigns in 1913. This is when General Huerta takes over, and with military support, he ends up assassinating Madero. He's unpopular, and he loses power after 15 months. And then we go to Venustiano Carranza, and Carranza takes control of the government and turns on the former allies that he had, Zapata and Villa. He murders Zapata in 1919, which ends the Civil War. He negotiates Villa's retirement in 1920, and then Pancho Villa is murdered in 1923. You should investigate and see if you think that is a coincidence. The Constitution of 1917 establishes government control of resources, redistributes the land, limits foreign land ownership, and gives rights to workers and women. So overall, that is an improvement for many of the Mexicans. All right, Alvaro Obregón. He is a supporter of Zapata, and he overthrows Carranza in 1920 in order to institute the final draft of the 1917 Constitution and democracy. He supports public education, makes Spanish the common language, and nationalism. And he helps unite the diverse regions of Mexico. Unfortunately, he is assassinated in 1928. All right, so the rest of the story is that in 1929, the Institutional Revolutionary Party, known as PRI, takes power, and they pretty much control the Mexican government for the rest of the 20th century. And the 1917 Constitution is the one that they still have in Mexico today. So there is your brief century or so of Mexican history. Make sure you have your notes in your notebook and you show me for credit.